Okay, everybody, this is my spoiler review of the White Lotus Season 3, Episode 3, The Meaning of Dreams. I'm going to break my review into 5 parts for all the different storylines going on, but we'll start with the Ratliffs. Now, Victoria has this dream that looks like something out of a Mike Flanagan show, and in this dream, Jaclyn says to her, this is what it looks like before a tsunami. This is on a beach that's in front of their home, and she is walking straight into the tsunami in the dream. So why this would be in her subconscious is because I pointed out in the last review I did of the end of last episode, talking about how Jaclyn was telling the family a story about a girl warning about a tsunami. No one would listen to her, so that's why that thought process is in Victoria's head, and why Lachlan's the one saying it to her on the beach in the dream. But that symbolism there of her walking straight into tsunami says it all, and her walking into this tsunami that is about to happen with her family, and in particular her husband. And there is something else brewing there, which we're going to get to. But they actually talk about this at breakfast the next day, and Piper talks about it could be a warning, a window into something. Every symbol has a meaning, the collective unconscious, which Saxon, of course, opposes this idea. And at one point, he's even pumping his pecs, which was just total Saxon moment. And one of the things going on here at the same time as Timothy's phone is just going off the hook at this point, and then we learn the FBI is at his office looking for him. The lawyer leaves a voicemail saying, "Do not talk to anyone until you hear from me." So what that plants in Timothy's head is to literally get rid of everybody's phones, because we see that Saxon's getting calls from one of the work offices. I'd also predicted in my review last episode that this was going to be a thing that was going to happen, where Timothy was eventually going to get rid of his phone, and we'll see he actually hesitates but gets rid of his phone too. And I do think that while this tsunami's happening in the background in the States, I think that Timothy's also going to have some freedom he's feeling not having his phone, and have a kind of change there. Now, before they get rid of all the technology, Jaclyn shows him on his iPad a video of a tsunami coming and a man just standing there, and he's not even running. That's exactly, obviously, what Timothy is doing right now in the tsunami in his life. But you see, when Timothy says the idea for everyone to get rid of their phones and says Piper's right, this is going to make Saxon completely snap. He's like, you're just going to give them my phone because Piper's having some sort of Buddhist identity crisis. And he snaps and says, you always get what you want. And she says he always gets what he wants. And meanwhile, Jaclyn is like, just take the phone, I don't care. And it's cool because we see a transition shot later on of 3 geckos, and you see one gecko snapping at the other gecko while one's just like staying there dormant. And that to me was just symbolizing the kids in that situation, with Jaclyn obviously being the dormant one. And you see Timothy goes so far to cover what's really going on by telling Saxon how impressed he is with him work-wise. And this, we see, is clearly a lie. You could see it in Jason Isaac's face, that like sadness in his eyes, which is just great acting. And Saxon, we see how much he wants his dad's approval. And that's how Timothy knows he can win Saxon over and get him to listen. I'm really scared too that this is going to all lead to Saxon pinning the blame on his dad, maybe getting all drugged out and getting in trouble and loopy and being strange, and blaming it on Piper because of the phone situation, getting rid of the phones, and then him thinking that he's doing it for Piper now. And of course, when Saxon gives his computer in, you see that Piper makes a joke about it. It has all this porn on it, and creepily afterwards, Saxon will check out his sisters. And so we see a big theory going on right now about these incest vibes coming from Saxon. And it's interesting because you're wondering if Victoria knows something, why she's so pilled out all the time. And we're seeing the process of Timothy becoming that way through what he's going through. But what led Victoria there? What was her tsunami in her life that she's choosing to ignore? And I wonder if it's something to do with that. You also see just nice writing here that kind of gives you an idea of identity, that theme going on this season, how people see themselves. And Victoria says she likes her massage therapist. She says she's soft but firm, and I think that's what Victoria obviously sees herself as and strives to be like. And then we'll see the siblings get separated, but Jaclyn has a corrective posture treatment scheduled, and Saxon wants to buff him up with protein shakes. I also love a transition shot here at one point is just a LBH, a loser back home, just swimming in the pool. That was a nice touch. It made me laugh. And you see Saxon says to Jaclyn, you want to die a virgin? Let's get you laid this week. I'll help. And right on cue, Chloe and Chelsea walk by. And I'm wondering that if Saxon finds out that Chloe is a hooker, that Rick thinks she is, clearly, that he's going to use a Chloe to get his brother laid. We'll see. Now, Piper goes back to the temple to schedule her interview with the monk, and she sets it up now Friday at 2 p.m. I wonder if she's ever even going to get that interview. You don't see that same eagerness on the other side of the monk she's scheduling with, but you see how much she likes the vibes of the place. I think this might be hinting towards a happier ending for Piper, an escape ending from her family at the end of this. We know Mike White likes those kind of stories. And I thought it was really interesting when Lachlan had his corrective posture treatment, and the therapist is telling him he has a defensive posture. And he's like, you pleaser, people pleaser, which he totally is. You meet people on their plane of reality, which is totally true. So I really like he's showing him that through that thinking is what's actually creating the posture he's putting out. Now, big thing happens here where Victoria offers Timothy one of her pills, and he's like, not my thing, that's your thing. And she's like, they're not addictive. I take them when I need them. He will take this pill because he's at that breaking point now of anxiety. We'll see later he's looking for more, and he finds the pills and takes another. And she asks him, in what's crazy, a reverse role here, where she's like, you think you'll be able to sleep after you napped all day? She's like, you want one of my pills? They really work. And he says, I don't take drugs, even though he already just took it for that exact reason. And she's like, Tim, is something going on? So she can see through there, obviously something's bothering him. She's been in that place too, but she doesn't know what it is. Also important that Saxon brings up, it's a full moon tomorrow at dinner. And this is a really big holiday in Thailand. He's like, I got us invited on a guy's yacht, which is Gary, aka Greg, and they're setting up all these characters to be on that yacht next episode. She's going to be big. And it's interesting because when Piper asks if her dad's okay, Victoria says that jet lag has been hard for him. He hasn't been sleeping well. He finally just conked out, and that's the kind of stuff she would say in the beginning when she was seeming tired. But we know it's other reasons. So just more about wondering what went on with Victoria to get her this way. So really with the Ratliffs, I think it's cooking and it's getting better and better, and it's one of the most fascinating storylines. Where I also think it's getting really good is with Chelsea and Rick. Now Rick is eavesdropping on the convo Fabian is having with C. Turla. I'm not crazy though. You see that Fabian's talking to her about wanting to perform at one of her sessions at night, and it's too similar to me to the Mia storyline for season 2. I hope it branches out from something other than that and not be too predictable, where he has his moment at the end of the season where he's finally able to sing. I think it's just way too similar, but I'm guessing that hopefully it'll be different. But you see Rick says to C. Turla that he wants to introduce her to a director he knows and that he's a producer. And he says, well, the director happens to be in Bangkok. So he's just setting up a way to get in to meet her husband. And then Chelsea will ask him, what was he doing over there? And she says he's a Scorpio. He's so secretive. She's like, it's not easy for me, Rick. I'm an Aries. I need everything out in the open. And he says it doesn't concern you. And he's like, I'm going to Bangkok tomorrow. And she wants to go with him. He's like, well, maybe if you stay here, you'll meet a rich guy you can sponge off of. And she's like, I'm your soulmate, Rick. And she's like, how can you be? Our signs aren't even compatible. So nice little funny scene too. But the second meditation session happens for Rick. And you see that the doctor says, underneath anger, there is always a sadness, something we are grieving. What are you grieving? And he says, I've done a lot of bad things. Trust me, I made a lot of mistakes. My father was a good, decent man. Never got to know him because he was murdered, and I can't get my life back, but maybe I can still get some satisfaction. So, like I said in my previous review, this reminds me of the Sawyer storyline from Lost, and that I think that the owner husband is someone involved with his father's murder and he wants revenge. That's why he wants that satisfaction. And this is really important, this writing, because when he's saying he's done a lot of bad things, trust me, and we're talking about that theme of identity and how you see yourself this season, that he sees himself as one of these venomous snakes in this following situation, which we're going to get to. Now, what I think is going to get a lot of White Lotus fans hype is just the mention here of Tanya, because Chelsea and Chloe talk at the pool, and Chloe's talking about Gary, which just is Greg, and she says he has an ex-wife, but he never talks about her, Tanya. All I know, she was a real mental patient, but she says she killed herself, which isn't true. We obviously saw she just jumped off the boat trying to get to another boat and died. It's interesting. She says all they found was like a part of her leg. So this is from the false story, obviously, that Greg is telling her what happened, because it's not the case. I mean, Daphne found Tanya's full body, but it's interesting hearing the mention of just Tanya in any way, and that Greg is lying, obviously, about what really happened with her to cover his tracks. Now, Rick tells Chelsea, I'm going to town, I need weed, and she obviously runs after him, of course. I love the sound design this episode, and you start seeing the good sound design here when he smokes the joint, and it's like these wind chimes noise happens when he exhales, so like that sound design underneath a lot of the emotions of our characters are kind of showing you what they're feeling throughout the episode. I'll point that out in other scenarios. Now, he takes her to the snake show to have fun because she says she wants to have fun again. And you see Rick right away doesn't like these venomous snakes in cages. He says they still got a right to be free. So he's talking, looking at these things like he looks at himself and believes he has the right to be free. This was also foreshadowed the last episode because Chloe was infatuated with a snake choker in the store. This snake choker was also what the shoplifter ended up taking too, which interesting to think about. Maybe he'll have something to do with those shoplifters with Rick in one way or another. But knowing that that snake is representing Rick, it makes sense that Chloe's infatuated with that snake choker. You see, Rick doesn't like the show. People eating chips, laughing, smiling, watching these snakes suffer. So he has his Pee Wee Herman moment, like when Pee Wee Herman's freeing the pets in the pet shop from the fire. It reminded me so much of that. But you see the snake will bite Chelsea. So she's taken to the hospital, bandage is put on, she's fine. So that says a lot too, because just that having the snake bite her is kind of like if she's with someone like Rick, it's going to bite her a lot of ways. Literally, this is what happens by being with someone like Rick. He let snakes out and ended up she got hurt because of it. But she still is okay and she's still rolling with it. So that is Chloe there in their relationship, and that she's okay with that. She knows what she signed up for. But Rick will explain to Chloe he thinks his weed he was smoking was laced, which is obviously not the truth, because he'll explain later to Chelsea what he was really thinking. And we learn that they're going to be going on Greg's yacht tomorrow as well. So I think on this yacht, Greg and these people he's going to be with are going to be looking for their next victims they can take advantage of, like Tanya. Now, Rick calls this character we don't know of Frank. He's like, I need your help with a couple of things. And this guy's in Bangkok, so he's going to be someone he's going to need, obviously, to do what he has to do with that hotel manager's husband. And you see the writing's really good here. When he's talking to Chelsea about the snakes, he's like, I felt bad for them. She says snakes are evil. Read the Bible. He's like, well, even evil things shouldn't be treated like shit. It's only going to make them more evil. And she says, yeah, well, I could have been killed. But this, again, is how she's treating Rick. And yes, she could have been killed, but she still stays with him. She literally says to him, if you kill me, I will follow you into the next life. You will never get rid of me. So the way he's looking at that snakes is the way she's looking at her, but she's not even kind of realizing that connection all the way. But we do as the audience, which is just really cool. So it's definitely my favorite storyline of the episode and the best we've seen of it so far this season. Now let's go to the three best friends. And they're slowly bringing in this character, Valentin, who's a Russian, and he's with them. And when they're around him, I love they're playing this moaning sound under the music here. Like I was talking about the design of how you're supposed to feel what these characters are feeling just being around this guy. And Jaclyn's still encouraging Laurie to have a fling with him. So she's the one who requests an energy session for Laurie. She has it, says it felt intimate in a way. But you'll see when they're talking about that, Kate says she feels that stuff's kind of witchy and it freaks her out. And this is when Jaclyn brings up what freaks her out is Christianity and religion, because it's made for men, and this is why she'd like the witchy stuff, because it's more targeted towards women. And she's like, in religion, women cry on the sidelines, it's the epic battle, good versus evil. She's like, that doesn't speak to me. This is where Kate reveals she goes to church, and this is a big shocker to Jaclyn and Laurie. And Kate's like, I love the people there, it's moving. And you're realizing this is in Texas, and that's what they're realizing. So they're like, oh my God, who are these people you're around? And Jaclyn's like, if I was around a bunch of Texans who voted for Trump, I guess I would feel alienated. And then they go to see and ask if she's Republican. She says she's independent, but Dave's Republican. So they can kind of make connections there. And Laurie's like, you didn't vote for Trump though, did you? Meaning like, they know she did now at this point. You see in her face that she did. And you knew this while this was happening. This was setting up our final shit talk session of the season, because we hadn't had one yet about Kate. Now, I don't know how I feel about having Trump's name said, where I think you could have just said voted Republican, because every time you bring in like a real life figure to a story that's not based totally in real life with like any real life figures in the show to date, you're changing that. And I think it sometimes can take you out of it a little bit. I don't mind it, but I'm a little mixed about how it was written. But I see the purpose of it in the story sense that you needed to be a point about who she voted for. So I get it. But it's risky business, I feel like, of just bringing real life figures into shows like this sometimes. Now, in that shit talking session, they're like, she's always like this, always taking on personality of person she's with, talking about Dave, her husband. And like the other situations of this, you don't know how much they actually make out of it and hear, but she knows that they're talking about her. So now that we've seen with the three best friends, they've all caught each other talking crap, we've got a really good idea of their relationship. However, I don't think their storyline's the most interesting. at the moment, and you can kind of predict beat by beat so far, but we got to see where it goes next episode because I'm getting a little impatient with it, but I hope it kind of kicks up a little more. But it's decent so far, but not the most fascinating. Now let's go to Mook and Gaitok's story. So Gaitok definitely makes some kind of offering for Mook to this shrine, something to win her over. And I feel like he's barking up the wrong tree already by doing that he might be giving that up to some kind of deity that you probably shouldn't even be messing with to bring in the supernatural element to get the girl you want. Now he'll see Sir Lata, and he thanks him for his service after the shoplifting incident, even though he really messed up a bit because he's the one who let the shoplifter in, being distracted about tickets from Valentin. But then he stops her and says, if you ever need my help in Bangkok, or if you need another bodyguard, I'd be very happy to. He's doing this all for Mook. He's throwing his own values away to impress this girl. And then he'll go over and tell Mook he did this, which was so cringe. When she asked him, would you leave the island? And he says, if you came with me, I was like, oh my God, it was so hard to watch. And then you see the bodyguards go to see Mook because he said this in front of the bodyguards, what he said about wanting to be considered for a position. And they tell him that Fabian wanted to fire him for messing up. And he said the only reason he's still there is because Tritala is too kind. And they bully him here too. So just in a bad spot for Mook. Then they set up at the end of the episode that Mook has a meeting with Fabian the next morning. It doesn't sound good. But I'm really worried about where this is going to go with Mook and who he becomes. Because I feel like he's a character who's changing in the wrong ways. He's completely changing himself for the wrong reasons. And changing himself as a person and his identity. Going back to the identity theme. Because he knows it doesn't fit perfectly with the girl he likes, so he wants to be like the bodyguards that she was talking about to him and admiring in the first episode. But I only think that's going to go bad. It's good, but is it interesting enough? Is it something that's not pretty predictable? I don't know. I think it's kind of in that group of like the three best friends where it's like definitely not as good quality as some of the White Lotus storylines we've seen before, but that can change. Now let's go to Belinda. I love at one point Pornchai is carrying Belinda in the pool in some kind of relaxation session. That was great. And this connection they're having, and they have dinner together. And she tells him, I was depressed before I got here. She talks about Armand's death, aka to me the best character in the show. I wish he never died. I would be okay with a retcon in a way to bring her back, in the sense of like, oh, maybe he is a Chun we don't know about. As long as we can bring back the essence of that character, I'd be very happy. But she also brings back Tanya flaked on her and brings up she saw someone she thinks she recognized, which is Greg. And it's interesting she doesn't mention Tanya dying here. So I don't even know if she knows Tanya died in Italy. Because I feel like if she did, she'd be really interested in Greg and bring that up to him. But when she goes over and she's like, do I know you? She's like, I work at White Lotus in Maui. Pretty sure I saw you there. And she's like, Greg. And he's like, Gary. And I felt so scared for Belinda here. But again, I think it'd be too easy for Belinda to be the one who's killed in the finale. Too predictable. But you're nervous because now she's going to be on Greg's radar. Like, she knows too much already. Even just a hint that someone there knows who he really is not good. But she also said this in front of Rick, Chelsea, and Chloe, which gives me a little piece that maybe Rick, who's good at seems like reading people, will be someone who will kind of catch on to Greg here, if anything. Greg will also notice Chloe eyeing Saxon, which is no little thing either, and he didn't seem happy about that. So Greg is noticing a lot of things now, and now we know how dangerous this guy is, especially setting up all these people basically to go on the yacht. Now, Pornchai walked Belinda all the way back, like something you do on a romantic date, and I really think he wanted the invite in here, and he's like, I hope you have good dreams of me, and I have good dreams of you. And he's tipsy when he's saying this. And she's like, is that a Thai expression? Thinking that maybe he's just saying this. Like, she's looking at it like she wants this guy, but she's just like, can't believe that he would want her back kind of situation. So she's always checking certain things. Like, she even asked the therapist she was with earlier in the episode if they also wash people's feet like he did. So she's just always looking if there's more to it. But she's like hesitant, like can't believe it that this guy would be into her. But he definitely is. But Belinda thinks she hears someone near her room, which was creepy as hell, so we'll see what that's all about. But overall, I'm going to give this episode an 8.4. I thought it was the best of the season, but I'm hoping for like a real awesome episode next week, because it's still testing my patience just a little bit. I'm really enjoying it, like I always do White Lotus, but I'm waiting for that episode that takes us to the next level, which we haven't got this season yet. But I'm trusting Mike White. Again, I think this was still really good, and I'm sure this is going to go interesting route, and I'm right now totally invested with the Ratliffs and with the Rick and Chelsea story, with the other stories kind of fallen behind a bit for me, but I am enjoying Belinda. It's just so small, her time in it, but also I am enjoying that as well. And of course, because she's a legacy character, so there's a little more investment into it already. But overall, I liked it, and I have big hopes for next episode with being the full moon and this party on the yacht. So let me know what you guys think down below. I love to hear your thoughts. I read every comment, try to respond as many as I can. Hit that sub button so you don't miss one of my reviews of the White Lotus. I also do celebrity interviews, and I'm also reviewing Severance at the moment, and I'll see you next time.